Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at an unpardoned sin and a hidden kingdom in our continuing study of the life of Christ. Last time we noted some of the Sabbath controversies. If we had looked at Matthew's account, Matthew chapter 12, verse 1 through 8, we have the instance of the disciples of Jesus who were picking grain on the Sabbath day, and then Jesus heals a man's withered hand on the Sabbath day. So both of those, they didn't necessarily happen on alternate Sabbaths, but they happened at different points along the time of the ministry of Jesus, and they're spotlighted in those passages. What we look at today is in Matthew chapter 12, verse 22, he's going to cast out a demon, and then that will bring an accusation forth. The enemies of Jesus will be unable to deny obvious power that is taking place. And so instead he will face the accusation that his power is from Satan. Let's look at those passages. Matthew chapter 12, verse 22, Then a demon-possessed man who was blind and mute was brought to Jesus, and he healed him so that the mute man spoke and saw. Evidently, it was obvious that this man had complete inability previously, and Jesus heals him, presumably, with a word. And the crowds were amazed, and were saying, This man cannot be the son of David, can he? They're wondering at that, the way the question is worded. But when the Pharisees heard this, they hear the public opinion who's beginning to believe in Jesus. They said, This man casts out demons only by Beelzebul, the ruler of the demons. Beelzebul, that's a sort of a title that they had given to Satan. Baal, remember, was the old Canaanite term for one of the false gods of the Canaanites, Baal. And Zebul, that was just added to that. Actually, it was the father of flies, and sometimes they called him the father of stuff that flies hang around. It was considered a sort of a put-down. But it was a title for Satan. And they're saying, yes, he has supernatural power, but it's satanic supernatural power. What they're doing is they're pointing to Jesus and to the power of the Spirit that's operating through him, and they're saying that is Satan. And knowing their thoughts, Jesus said to them, Any kingdom divided against itself is laid waste, and any city or house divided against itself will not stand. If Satan casts out Satan, he's divided against himself. How then will his kingdom stand? And if I by Beelzebul cast out demons, by whom do your sons cast them out? For this reason, they will be your judges. He says, look at what you're saying. If I've been defeating Satan, and it's obvious that everything that I'm doing is having people turn away from Satan, turning to God, then that just doesn't make sense. Why would I be attacking Satan? Why would I be pulling people out of Satan's kingdom? Why would I be destroying Satan's work? That accusation makes no sense. But if I cast out demons by the Spirit of God, and that's exactly what he has been doing, then the kingdom of God has come upon you. Remember how we started off with the ministry of Jesus. First John the Baptist, who was preaching the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God is at hand. And then Jesus came on the scene preaching the same thing, the kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of God is at hand. And it is. And not only is it at hand, it has come upon you. Or, how can anyone enter the strong man's house and carry off his property unless he first binds the strong man? And then he will plunder his house. Now, what's this strong man of whom Jesus is speaking? Well, the context is Beelzebul. The context is Satan. And Jesus has been binding the strong man. He has been binding Satan. He's not working in league with Satan. He has been binding Satan and carrying off his property. Here's a man who was bound by Satan, a demon-possessed man. And Jesus has loosed him and has carried him away and has plundered the very property of Satan. He who is not with me is against me, and he who does not gather with me scatters. There's a war going on, and you're on one side or the other. And you are on Jesus' side or you are on Satan's side. And those who are against Jesus, these Pharisees who are falsely accusing him, are aligning themselves, whether they realize it or not, they are aligning themselves with Satan. Therefore, I say to you, any sin and blasphemy shall be forgiven people, but blasphemy against the Spirit shall not be forgiven. If you close yourself off to the Spirit of God, say, whatever that is, I don't want it, then what you're saying is, I want that other spirit, because there's a war going on, and you're choosing sides. Verse 32, whoever speaks a word against the Son of Man, it shall be forgiven him, but whoever speaks against the Holy Spirit, it shall not be forgiven him, either in this age or in the age to come. It's a dangerous thing to look at the Spirit of God and say, I don't want that, because it's the Spirit of God that draws you to salvation. If you reject that very thing that draws you to salvation, then how can you then be saved? Either make the tree good and its fruit good, or make the tree bad and its fruit bad. You see, it's either good or it's bad. It's not in the middle. There is no middle road. For the tree is known by its fruit. Look at the results that it brings forth. You brood of vipers, how can you, being evil, speak what is good? For the mouth speaks out of that which fills the heart. The good man brings out of his good treasure what is good. The evil man brings out of his evil treasure what is evil. What's coming out of your heart? What's coming out of your mouth? Is it good or is it evil? And if it's evil, go to the one who changes the heart. Go to the Spirit and have your heart changed. But I tell you that every careless word that people speak, they shall give an accounting for it in the day of judgment. It's a dangerous thing to let your mouth go on and on and on. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned, because what comes out of your mouth starts in your heart. What's in your heart? Then some of the scribes and Pharisees said to him, Teacher, we want to see a sign from you. Oh, wait a minute. They had seen sign after sign after sign. The last sign gave impetus for the false accusation that this was coming from Satan. So, Jesus, notice he's dealt with this issue, this question of power. Now he deals with this question of influence. They're wanting to, Lord, give us a sign, and he's going to refuse their request for a sign. He answered and said to them, An evil and adulterous generation craves for a sign, and yet no sign will be given to it, but the sign of Jonah the prophet. And he explains what he means by that in verse 40. For just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the sea monster, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The sign is the death, the burial, and I want to suggest subsequently the resurrection. The greatest sign of all is the resurrection of Jesus. But just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the sea monster, so the Son of Man is going to be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. His death, his burial, and I think his resurrection will be the sign. Now, how is Jonah like Jesus? Well, he's like Jesus in that he went 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the sea monster. Jesus is going to go 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the earth, in the heart of the earth. At the end of that time, Jonah was spit up on dry land. At the end of the 3 days and 3 nights in the grave is going to spit up Jesus, as it were. He will rise from the dead in victory. But we should also ask while we're here, how is Jonah not like Jesus? You see, Jonah was the reluctant prophet. There's nothing reluctant about Jesus. Jonah would have rathered the people of Nineveh burn and die and be destroyed, because he didn't really care for them. That's why he initially went the other way and took his ocean trip. It's because he didn't want them to be saved. Jesus, on the contrary, reflects the compassion of God. That's how they are not like. Jesus is the compassionate one who gives himself so that others will not die. The men of Nineveh, he says, will stand up in this generation at the judgment. And that doesn't mean they're going to stand up like, today. It means they're going to stand up with this generation. They're going to be accusing this generation and will condemn it because they repented at the preaching of Jonah. And behold, something greater than Jonah is here. So notice this generation is doing some serious things. This generation of which Jesus is speaking, this generation that was facing him on that day, they had just committed a sin from their words. A sin which was unpardonable. A sin from which there was no return because they were cutting themselves off from the very Spirit of God. That's not saying everybody living in that day was doing that. But these leaders who were pointing to the Spirit and blaspheming that Spirit were cutting themselves off. And there was no repentance, as opposed to the men of Nineveh who did repent. The Queen of the South will rise up with this generation at the judgment and will condemn it because she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon. And here they are living in the land. They don't have to come from the ends of the earth. They're living in the land, and something greater than Solomon is here, and they're rejecting it. Now, when the unclean spirit goes out of a man, it passes through the waterless places seeking rest. There is a seeking that ought to have been taken place, and instead they've brought about a restlessness. And this here in this parable, he says, here is an unclean spirit goes out of man, it passes through waterless places seeking rest, doesn't find it. Then it says, I'll return to my house from which I came, and when it comes, I will find it unoccupied, swept, and put in order. You see, Jesus came to bring rest, and they rejected it. And here they have been so concerned with putting their house in order and removing ceremonial uncleanliness. They've been tireless about it. But then, when they don't take the rest that was offered by Jesus, notice it goes and takes along with it 7 other spirits, more wicked than itself. And they go in and live there, and the last state of that man becomes worse than the first. That is the way it will be also with this evil generation. Those who reject the rest that Jesus brings are going to go out and take for themselves that which was much worse. Their condition will not be the same, will not be better. It will be a great deal worse. This evil generation is guilty of doing that. Now, Jesus indicates then, in the next section, he's just refused the request of a sign, those who wanted to say, okay, we're going to try to get you to do what we want you to do. And likewise, now there are going to be some of his family members who come and want to have him come out and meet them. You know, they're trying to get him to do what they want him to do. And he indicates those who are really his family. While he was still speaking to the crowds, behold, his mother and brothers, we would say maybe his half-brothers, because remember, Joseph wasn't his biological father because he was born of Mary while she was still a virgin. But subsequently to that, after that, apparently Joseph and Mary had had other children. So his mother and brothers were standing outside seeking to speak to him. And someone said to him, behold, your mother and your brothers are standing outside seeking to speak to you. You think if mom calls, if brothers call, then you have to stop what you're doing and go out and take care of that. But Jesus answered the one who was telling him and said, who is my mother? And who are my brothers? Now he's not having a memory lapse. It's not a senior moment. But verse 49, and stretching out his hand toward his disciples, he said, behold, my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father who is in heaven, he is my brother and sister and mother. Do you want to be related to Jesus? Do you want to be connected to Jesus? Obey him. Follow him. Be one of his disciples. That day, Jesus went out of the house and was sitting by the sea. Now, notice we've transitioned into chapter 13. But it's part of the same story because it happens that day. That day, Jesus went out of the house and was sitting by the sea, probably the Sea of Galilee in view, and large crowds gathered to him. So he got into a boat and sat down, and the whole crowd was standing on the beach. Here they go out by the sea, and Jesus is going to teach. And he's going to give a series of parables. We're going to be seeing the parable of the sower, and the parable of the wheat and the weeds, and the parable of the mustard seed, and the parable of the leaven. In all four parables, there's going to be something planted. There will be growth and transformation. In all four parables, there will be a realization of result at the end of the season of growth. And sometimes that will be what is expected, and sometimes it will be what is not quite expected. So he gives four parables in rapid succession of planting and growth and transformation and harvest, result at the end of the season of growth. So let's look at the first parable. And he spoke many things to them in parables. And here's the first one. By the way, what is a parable? A parable is a story. Parabole, para is like alongside of, like a paramedic is somebody who operates alongside a medic, or a paralegal is somebody who operates alongside a legal person. Para is alongside of, and bole is to throw. So it's an illustration that's thrown alongside a spiritual truth to teach something. And so he speaks many things to them in parables, saying, behold, here's the first parable, the sower. A sower is somebody who sows the seed, who plants the seed. And you wouldn't necessarily take the seed and shove it into the ground. That's rather time-consuming. So you'd throw it out along the way. Behold, the sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seed fell beside the road, and the birds came and ate them up. After all, birds like seeds as well. And others fell on the rocky places where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprang up, because they had no depth of soil. But when the sun had risen, they were scorched, and because they had no root, they withered away. So you have some on rocky places, and the roots just aren't able to penetrate, and they die. Others fell among the thorns, and the thorns came up and choked them out. And so you notice the first is carried away by the birds. The second, it dies because there's no depth of soil, rocky places. The third, thorns choke them and they die. And finally we have a good part of the story. And others fell on the good soil and yielded a crop, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. When he says, he who has ears to hear, let him hear, that's code word for, this isn't all that easy to understand. You need to think about this. You need to consider this. You need to ponder this, because there's a truth here that you might miss. Now, the disciples, they come up and they say to Jesus, why do you speak to them in parables? We're not getting it. It was hard enough when you were speaking clearly. We were struggling to understand. Now you're going to speak in parables. Now it's really hard, and your message might be lost. Why are you doing it, Jesus? And Jesus answered them, to you it has been granted to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been granted. You see, what had happened previously with some of those committing a sin that was unpardonable, who distanced themselves, rejected the Spirit of God, blasphemed the Spirit of God. Jesus says, it has not been given to them to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven. They didn't want it, so now they don't get it. Verse 12, but whoever has, to him more shall be given, and he will have an abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has shall be taken away from him. Jesus is not going to give his truth to those who don't want his truth, to those who have rejected his truth. You only get it by believing it and acting upon it. You see, unbelief says, show me and I'll believe. Belief says, I will believe, now show me. And that's what's taking place here. Therefore, I speak to them in parables, because while seeing they do not see, and while hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. And in their case, the prophecy of Isaiah is being fulfilled. And now he's going to quote from Isaiah, which says, you will keep on hearing, but will not understand. You will keep on seeing, but will not perceive. For the heart of this people has become dull. With their ears they scarcely hear. They have closed their eyes. Otherwise they would see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and return, and I would heal them. But that's not going to take place. Because of their rejection, I have rejected them, and I'm not going to continue to give them truth. Instead, they will hear parables. They will hear the truth veiled behind a veil of parables. Which means that parables, while on the one hand oftentimes illustrate truth, in this case, parables are used to hide truth, to mask truth. The passage from which he quotes is that instance when Isaiah has beheld the glory of God filling the temple. And he had said, "Woe is me, I'm a man of unclean lips," and God had brought coals from the altar, touched his mouth. And he says, "He touched my mouth with it," and said, "Behold, this has touched your lips, and your iniquity is taken away, and your sin is forgiven." And I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" And I said, Here am I, send me." And he said, "Go and tell this people," keep on listening. Here's the part that Jesus quoted. "Keep on listening, but do not perceive. Keep on looking, but do not understand. Render the hearts of this people insensitive, their ears dull, and their eyes dim. Otherwise they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and return and be healed." And that had been back in Isaiah's day, but notice it has application to Jesus' day as well. He is the one who comes forgiving sin. He is the one who comes forgiving iniquity, doing away with sin. And yet those who reject him are going to remain in their sins and be blinded by it and be deafened by it, and their hearts will not be healed. Isaiah goes on to say, "Then I said, Lord, how long?" And he answered. You see, this is the rest of the passage, and when Matthew quotes it, you're supposed to get this. "I said, how long, Lord, how long?" And he answered, "Until cities are devastated and without inhabitant. Houses are without people, and the land is utterly desolate." Jesus doesn't quote that. Matthew doesn't quote that. But you're supposed to remember the echo of that. That's the rest of the passage. And it is a veiled warning that when Isaiah said it, and now when Jesus quotes Isaiah saying it, that the rest of that passage brings judgment upon those who don't believe. Judgment upon the land, judgment upon the cities, and indeed that will also, you go to Jerusalem today, you can still see the ruins of that once great part of the city which was pulled down. Now other parts of the city have been rebuilt, but you can still see the ruins from the Temple Mount of how not one stone was left upon another. On the contrary, on the opposite to that, I started to say it to the contrary, but it's not really contrary. Its opposition is the blessing that's given to those who see. He said, "Blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear. For truly I say to you that many prophets and righteous men desired to see what you see," speaking to his disciples, "and did not see it, and to hear what you hear, and did not hear it." They were looking forward. Throughout the prophets, they were looking forward to the very things that Jesus' disciples were getting to see. And you are particularly blessed. So he tells us the story of the sower, of the seed, and the soil. And now he explains that. He will go on to explain that the sower pictures the one who's sowing the word, that Jesus himself is the sower. And what he has been doing, he has been sowing seed. He has been sowing that which grows up to eternal life. And the seed that he sows is the word of God. He has been giving God's word. His message, repent for the kingdom of heaven is at hand, and his explanation of what is entailed in that kingdom is seed, which can be planted and which can produce a harvest. And the soil in which he plants that seed are the hearts of men. The seed has been applied to your heart, but what kind of heart do you have? Is it a hardened heart? Is it a heart where the tempter takes the seed away before it has a chance to grow? Is it a thorny heart, or is it good soil? Hear then the parable of the sower. He explains it now. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, in other words, it just doesn't penetrate, the evil one comes and snatches away what's been sown in his heart. This is the one on whom the seed was sown beside the road. You ever see someone, they hear the word of God, they hear the preaching of Jesus, they hear the good news, and it just bounces off. One ear goes in one ear and out the other. It doesn't penetrate at all, and pretty soon it's gone. It's as if it had never been there. That's the first seed. The second one, the one on whom the seed was sown on the rocky places, this is the man who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Here's someone who comes along, and he hears the gospel, and he says, yes, I'll do that. And yet he has no firm root in himself, but is only temporary. And when affliction or persecution arises because of the word, immediately he falls away. There are some folk who hear the gospel, and they make an initial affirmative response to the gospel, but as soon as anything gets hard, and it does, they're gone. It took no root in their hearts. Yes, there was a measure of faith. Yes, there was an initial reception. Maybe they walked an aisle, they said a prayer, they felt good for a bit. But they didn't last, they didn't stay. And hard times drove them away. And they're lost. It's as if the word had never been there. And the one on whom the seed was sown among the thorns. This is the man who hears the word. Maybe much like the second man. Maybe he initially receives it. But the worry of the world and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, and it becomes unfruitful. Notice the second man, it was the hard times that drove him away. In the third man, it's the good times that drive him away. Because you can be tested both by adversity or by pleasures. By bad times or by good times. They are both tests. Will they drive you away? Will they make you unfruitful? And the one on whom the seed was sown on the good soil. This is the man who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and brings forth some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. Real spiritual life reproduces. Doesn't always reproduce at the same rate, and that's okay. But there's reproduction that takes place in real spiritual life. So we have the first seed, it's beside the road, there's no roots, it's eaten by birds. That's, that's easy to see. That's the one who hears the word in one ear, out the other, and it's gone. The second seed, rocky ground, has shallow roots, it's scorched by the sun, looks like it has a measure of life for a short time, but it doesn't last. The third seed, likewise, it's among the thorns. It looks like it might have measure of life. It actually grows up among the thorns. But other things have deeper roots, and it's choked by the thorns. The bad times, the good times. And it's only in the case of the fourth seed, where it's sown beside the road, and the roots bring forth growth, and it produces fruit, and you have abiding life. Only in the fourth seed. Which are you? In the first one, there's no life. In the second and third, there are temporary life. And that's the danger, because you think, okay, I've got life, I'm there. But will it stand the test of time? Will it stand the test of adversity? Will it stand the test of pleasure? It's only temporary. It's only in the fourth seed that you have the fruitful life. And I pray that that might be the case for you.